Welcome back to Two Mommy Podcast, where touched out meets outnumbered. I am your host, Ashley, and if you're visiting with us today, that's what I say in the morning announcements at church. But if you're new here, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share all of those things on all platforms. I'm going to put them in the description notes and also probably somewhere around the screen. Anyway, if you're joining us from last week, we talked about the start of my fertility, the start of my fertility journey, and how this journey was really kind of the jump start to the faith that I have today. We talked about my marriage and how I thought a baby would cure my loneliness, but that's never true. And then we also talked about how I was diagnosed with PCOS, and that's kind of where our story leads us to today. We also talked about Tara. She's a main character, so make sure that you remember her name. So anyway, I remember telling my friends about my PCOS, and they were so supportive and definitely was kind of rooting me on along the way, which was really, really encouraging. And so Dr. Wilson became my doctor in 2020. And if Dr. Wilson, if you watch this at all, I love you from the bottom of my heart so much. She's such a big part of this story, and she's so amazing. If you're in Charlotte and you need an OBGYN, call Dr. Wilson at Providence OBGYN. Anyway, she set out a treatment plan for me. She became my doctor in 2020, and it definitely was a whirlwind year of ups and downs. So y'all know that was the COVID year, the start of it. And so I started working out regularly, and I had a trainer who's Tara's son, Keon. He still trains. He's wonderful. And I did group training. And so it was super hard because I don't like working out, because I'd be like, I can't breathe. And so that's never fun. So I hated working out, and I was just so out of shape. But they encouraged me to kind of keep going and definitely encouraged me to push myself. And so they didn't really know about the fertility journey that I was on, because it was super private to me. Only a few people knew. And so they were just a big part of making sure that I worked out. We were all super accountable to each other. And so I went to the doctor consistently. At this point, I had my primary care doctor. I was doing all that I could physically. I was really, really, really trying. I was actively trying. And so spiritually, I was just kind of really trying to encourage myself. It was super personal to me, because despite all that I've been through, I knew that this journey was going to be a propeller to something greater. And that greater was my greater faith that I now have. And so once I told God that I would try him, it's kind of like he was like, bet, I'm going to give you a reason to continue to try me. Like, if you say you're going to try me, I'm going to give you a reason to. And it's going to be something that you can't take any credit for. Because the things that I would trust him with before was always something that was like, okay, well, God, I trust that you're going to keep me at my job. Or I trust that you're going to, do something for me. But it wasn't something that was like transformative like this. It was always like I had the faith that I was going to do something that I knew that God was going to allow me to do. I don't know if that makes sense, but this journey I knew was going to be a transformer. And so he kind of put me in a holding place. And so by my definition, a holding place is a spot where only you can rely on God to get out of. It's definitely a transformative place, and you kind of have a new taste for things, or you lack taste for things that you usually have. So for me, I was very much into kind of trying to really get into my word and propel my faith through action. And so when I was in this holding place, it's kind of like the place where God is going to transform you, and he's going to make you into the person that you need to be in order to receive the blessing that he's about to give you. I'm actually in a holding place right now, and it is such an incredibly uncomfortable place because you are constantly transforming and changing, and it's almost like your faith is moving faster than kind of what you're ready for. And so during that time, that was what was happening. It's like, I had Tara over here pushing me, encouraging me, pushing my faith, and then I also was fueling my faith. And then I would go to church and get continuous fuel, and it's such a great place, but if you're not used to it, it can be uncomfortable. And I think that God kind of makes us feel this discomfort so that he can give us peace, or so that we can seek his peace. And that is where he had me at that time. It's like you don't have any options. Your safety nets don't work, or they're just so far beyond your reach that you have to rely on God. And so this is the place that my faith had to grow from. I call it transformative faith because he changed the fabric of my life. I am not the same person that I was when I started this journey, and it's such a beautiful thing. But that shedding of skin process is absolutely terrible because you're in a place, excuse me, you're in a place where you are kind of just not hurt by what's not happening, but you are definitely okay, God, what is going on? I'm doing everything that you want me to do. How else can I push myself? What else do you want for me to do? And this is where you kind of have to allow for God to be sovereign. And the thing about God's sovereignty is that even though it's good and he is good, he's going to be sovereign even when it doesn't feel good to you, or even when you feel like it's hurting you. He's going to do that. I think a lot of people liken the same thing to when they lose friends. Sometimes when you lose friends, you kind of go through that grieving process, but when you come out of it, you realize, okay, maybe it was for my good that this happened. And so that is the place where God is transforming me at this time, is allowing me to understand more of how sovereign he is, and then allowing him to have complete control, and allowing him to kind of be the line leader, the head of my life, the one that's going to lead and guide me, the one that's going to kind of just be there whenever I don't know what to do. So anyway, the process wasn't easy, but I had to build my faith. And so from the moment that I got diagnosed with PCOS, I started to write letters to my kids. And I hadn't seen them. They didn't have any names. Well, they did have names. They didn't have faces. I didn't know what they looked like. I'd never seen my kids. I would write letters to them. This was my only connection to them, was to send letters to heaven. And at the end of every letter, I would tell them to tell my grandma I said hi. And so my grandma has passed. By that time, she had passed several years. She passed the same year that I met my husband. And I just knew that she was probably up there just keeping them company. And I was super, super grateful for these letters. I've got 26 letters. And so I wrote a major of my letters after appointments and letdowns. I told them about everyone that loves them. I told them about how I took a test and it was negative. I went hiking one day on Crowder's Mountain and could not finish the hike. I told them all of these things. And these letters, when I go back and I read them, I just realize how much I've loved these kids. I would write them letters after pregnancy tests. I would write them letters just all the time. And then on top of writing letters, on top of writing letters after major setbacks, I would have to make a faith move. So I would buy clothes for the kids that were not there. I would continue to write letters. I called my kids by name because we've known their names for a long time. And so November 2020 comes and it marks 3 years of us trying. That's the year that I turned 30. And I was on weight loss medication. It kind of stalled at that time because I had been on it for a little while, but I had lost like 30 pounds. I really enjoyed my body. And at that time, I was just like, well, God, what in the world? Like, my faith wasn't faithing no more. Like, I didn't have any more faith. And I became depressed. I was the saddest I had ever been in my life. I've never been that sad. And my grandma has passed, my dad has passed, but this shook me so deeply that I didn't know which way to turn. I had struggled so bad with this sadness that I started to question the people who were there for me the most, whether they truly loved me, because I feel like a lot of love is conditional. And maybe one day I would do something so wrong that they wouldn't love me anymore. And I felt like nobody loved me. The letters that I wrote to my kids were so sad that I had to go back and apologize to them because I don't feel like parents should burden their kids with their sadness sometimes. I feel like it's fine for our children to see us express a sad emotion, but when I was writing to them, I was writing to them from such a dark place that I would not want to allow for them to ever read those letters. And even when I read them back, and I've read them back, don't cry. I've read them back before, and just to imagine that just to imagine that my sadness had gotten this far was just something so hurtful. And to have been that sad is just a completely, I don't know. And then at that moment, I said, well, why do I want to have a kid? Like, I don't want to be bringing a kid into this world and be sad at the same time. And so the next part of my treatment plan was to get on fertility-inducing drugs. The first drug that we was going to try was going to push my ovulation to give me a concrete window in which I can try to have our baby in. And I was so sad that I was ready to tell my doctor that I needed a break, because at this point I was at the very, 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 very bottom of my faith. I didn't have anything else to give. I was so completely empty that I didn't know where to go next. And I feel like God placed me there. Don't cry. I feel like God placed me there because the only way that I was going to come out of it was to seek Him. And while this journey was one of transformative faith at that time, I only had mustard seed faith, and mustard seeds are small. I had nothing else to give, and so I was sad. I remember my husband kind of just being like, why are you crying so much? Like, you're just really having a hard time. And I said, yeah, this is kicking my butt. Like, it's kicking my butt. Like, I'm at a place now where I don't have anything else to give. And so we both agreed that maybe it was time to take a break. And I had a doctor's appointment, soon after all of this. And so I remember going to workout, or skipping my workout because I just felt super sick. I remember crying through workouts. I remember just throwing up, and I remember not wanting to work out that day because I didn't feel good. And so the next day I went to sleep and I woke up, and the next day I was still feeling sick. And so my husband is like, well, why don't you take a pregnancy test? And I told him I can't take a pregnancy test because I'm just too sad. And I've taken a million pregnancy tests and they've all been negative, and I've had to kind of refuel my faith. And right now I have no more gasoline to refuel. So I don't want to take one. But then I remember feeling so peaceful that morning, and it's like something came over me and said, just take a test. And so I sat there and I peed on a little stick and I set it down and I washed my hands and probably went and brushed my teeth or brushed my hair. Like I went on about my day or what's going on and said, okay, well, let me look at this test. And it was positive. And so this is in January 2021. I called Tara and I was screaming and crying in the phone. My husband is screaming in the background about how his kid is going to be president. And, I tell her that I'm pregnant. And we kind of celebrate and we're just so happy about it. And I'm just thankful that even though I felt unworthy at that time of being able to receive God's blessing, He did not withhold it from me. I remember going to the doctor and hearing Bryce's heartbeat for the first time. And I just sat there and I cried because I got to see him. This baby that I had been writing to for months, I was able to finally see on an ultrasound screen, and I was able to hear his heartbeat. And the nurse said, oh, it was nice and strong. Nice, strong heartbeat. I remember her saying that and how it felt so comforting to know that he was inside of me. And so we had a gender reveal and a very healthy pregnancy. Bryce's birth was one that was traumatic for me. I had an induction with a Foley catheter, and it was terrible. It felt terrible. I would never recommend that to anyone, and I never want to do it again. And I ended up having an emergency C-section with him because his heart rate started to fall. It would drop every time that I would contract. And at that time, I was contracting so much that I couldn't even keep up. And so after 24 hours of labor, he was finally born. And he's my little guy. He's 2 now. And I just remember being so incredibly happy when I found out I was pregnant with him. And this is a wonderful place to stop and come back next week. And we're going to wrap up the discussion about the fertility journey and move on to other To Mommy stuff. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, whichever way you have found this podcast. Thank you for being a part of it. I hope that this was helpful, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.